Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our latest installment of the AWS and Innovation Bay content series. My name is Rohit Bhargava, and I am part of the startup team at AWS, where our mission is to help grow the quantity and quality of startups and founders coming out of Australia and New Zealand. We are extremely excited to have teamed up with the Innovation Bay team to deliver this weekly masterclass series that will run every Thursday from 12 to 1 p.m. And we're delighted to be joined by Sam Wong from Blackbird today to deliver a masterclass on pitch decks. Before I hand over the mic to Rachael Neumann, I just wanted to share a few quick notes from me. If you aren't already familiar with Innovation Bay, it is the longest running community group for tech startups and investors in Australia. Their mission is to support founders on their journey from idea to IPO and beyond. They run events and programs across the country and now online, all focused on helping a community of over 5,000 founders, people working in startups, investors, and others to learn, connect, and grow. If you're not already a member, sign up at innovationbay.com. As always, I'll jump in at the end to facilitate the audience Q&A part of the session. Please submit any questions you have into the Q&A tab, which you can find at the bottom of your screen. We'll also have the chat function running so you can engage with others in attendance, but as always, please be considerate of others whenever speaking through these channels. With that out of the way, I'll hand over the mic to Rachael Neumann to kick things off.
Thanks so much, Rohit. Hi, everyone. I'm Rachael Neumann from the Amazon Web Services team. Welcome to our webinar series. We've loved having so many of you join us week in, week out. As mentioned in the last session, we've heard from many of you that you'd like to see us dive deep with some experts like the one we have today on topics that they're absolutely masters in. You asked, we listened, and over time, we want to build out a repository of killer masterclasses where you can learn critical skills from leaders in the field. So last week we were joined by Tim Doyle, the founder of Eucalyptus, to discuss customer acquisition and growth strategies. And today we are excited to be joined by one of the investors behind Eucalyptus, Sam Wong. So Sam is a partner at Blackbird Ventures, which is a technology venture capital fund backing ambitious founders building global businesses. Originally operating only in Australia, Blackbird was an early investor in some of the biggest Aussie startup successes: Canva, Zook, Safety Culture, CultureAmp. And now Blackbird has recently raised a $30 million fund to also support and back New Zealand's most ambitious founders that Sam is heading up. Her investment areas of interest are the future of food, healthcare, wellness, and bottom-up SaaS. She's passionate about diversity in tech and venture and spearheaded the release of the Model Code of Conduct for the startup community. Prior to joining Blackbird, she was a startup founder, a product manager, and a lawyer. Today, Sam is going to be delivering a masterclass on pitch decks, how to structure them, what VCs look for. After her presentation, I'll jump in with Sam, and we're actually going to review Canva's early pitch deck slide by slide before we move on to some of your questions. Sam, thank you so much for joining us. Take it away.
Thanks for inviting me. So I have quite a meaty deck myself to get through, so I'm going to go really quickly through it, but I think a lot of the points that I'm making are illustrated best in Canva's slide, which is to this day the best deck I've ever seen, and so hopefully you'll get a lot out of that. So I'm just going to quickly share my screen, and hopefully you can all see that. Just give me a nod. Yeah,
looking good, Sam.
Great. So thank you for the intro. The number of it is that we invest in wild hearts with the wildest of ideas right at the beginning. So we love to invest early. We invested $250K in Canva's first round, and now we've invested over $150 million. And that's the sort of journey that we love to go on with early stage startups. Bit of extra context is I see about 1,000 pitch decks a year. During my time at Blackbird, I joined 5 years ago, I've probably seen close to that number of in-person pitches. So that qualifies me a little bit to sort of summarize, I guess, some of the feedback. I guess from that really big top of the funnel of 1,000 decks, I only have to make I can only make 2 to 3 new investments each year. So the goal for you guys is really to get further down the funnel from one of thousands that will be seen to hopefully one of a handful that a VC investor will make in a given year. And hopefully everything I share today helps you do that. Of course, a disclaimer, this is just my personal opinion and experience and observations from the last sort of 5-7 years. You'll meet many smart people who disagree with some of the stuff I say in here. In fact, even within Blackbird, we have disagreements about, oh, I hated that slide, or I loved that slide. Ultimately, it's your deck. You just need to take what's useful and resonates with you as good advice, and then discard the rest. So there'll be 3 parts to today. As I mentioned, I'm going to deliver some content and we'll jump into the Canva deck review and hopefully have time for Q&A. So about fundraising, it's a 6-month full-time job for someone, usually the CEO. There's a good chunk of time invested up front, preparing a deck and preparing a target list of investors and getting intros to those investors. There'll be a huge chunk of time, roughly half your time, actually pitching people in person or over video conference. Usually the next step with a venture fund is to pitch the full partner meeting. There's a due diligence period, and then hopefully you start to gather a term sheet or some term sheets. There are 2 types of decks, and this is sort of a common misapprehension with first-time funders. There's the send-along deck or the marketing deck, sometimes called a teaser deck. That's the thing you email ahead of time to say, hey, this is what I do, are you interested? It's reasonably short, 8 to 10 slides. And then in person, you're delivering a different deck. This is like either called a board deck or an in-person, different terminology for it, but it's a different document. It's much longer. You have about 30 minutes to present it, whereas your marketing deck probably gets about a minute of attention max. And it's typically either presented in person or right now over video conference. If you're interested in marketing deck content, please check out the Giant series. My colleague Michael Batko, who's the CEO of StartMate, has delivered an awesome presentation on marketing decks. Today is about board decks, and my goal is how to help you prepare a pitch deck for maximum impact in that setting. So a couple of like really quick basic questions to sort of set your mind up before you go into a pitch. Who are you pitching? Make sure you know that up front. Is it one partner? Is it the full investment team? How many people are you talking? How much do they know about your space that you're operating in? How much extra context do you have to give them before you really get into the meat of your pitch? And then on your side, who's attending? It's just the founders, guys. It's not advisors, and it's definitely not board members. It's such a turnoff when you have a company come in to pitch that you're pretty excited about, and then they sort of turn up chaperoned by an angel investor or a board advisor or someone. Like if that's appropriate, agree it up front, but like 99 times out of 100, it's not, and it's better you just the founders come alone. What is it? So it's typically broken up into 2 parts. One is you delivering a presentation, and say if it's a 1-hour meeting, you want no more than half of that time to be spent walking through your deck. You want to make sure there's a lot of time for Q&A or questions. And actually a bad pitch is one where you speak 90% of the time. So you want to give just enough of your best points to stimulate a really good conversation on the back of it, and be prepared to do a product demo. A lot of founders, make the choice not to do a product demo in the pitch, and that's sometimes often actually a good call from a flow perspective, but be prepared to show it. Basic meeting hygiene, arrive 10 minutes early, not more than 10 minutes early, because a lot of the time pitch meetings run back to back. And so you'll sort of be stepping on the toes of another founder if you arrive too much earlier than that. If you're attending in person and you need to fly in from somewhere, do it the night before. Airlines are notorious for being late and cancelling and so on. And, swap numbers in case people get lost or there needs to be a last minute reshuffle or something. Consider location. If it's video conferencing, pre-download all the software, make sure your presentations are working and all of that stuff. Think about noise levels. If you're meeting in a cafe or something like that, do you need Wi-Fi or cell connectivity in order to do a demo? Does it work smoothly in that context? If it doesn't, what can you do to be able to do a facilitated demo and work around some of those things? Just sort of anticipate all of that stuff up front. As I mentioned, it's a presentation. You don't need to print anything out and leave behind. You don't need to give business cards. If you're meeting in person or over video conference, you know how to get in touch with each other. And really the goal, as I mentioned, is just to kind of get to the next step or move further down the funnel. No one pretty much makes an investment decision off this first meeting. What you really need to do is generate enough excitement with the decision makers in the room to go, yes, we want to jump into DD. Trying to convey all the information about your business in 1 hour is a recipe for disaster. Really strip it back and just focus on what you need to do to get to the next step. So the basics. So I guess I don't even know if it's a framework. It's a bit too simple to call it a framework, but a good place to start when crafting your pitch deck is just to think about, if I only have 3 things that these investors remember about me after I walk out of the room, what are those 3 things? What are my 3 strongest points? You'd be amazed how few companies do that before they start drafting their deck. And inevitably, when they sort of want to draft their deck, they kind of Google pitch deck and start, using a template from Airbnb or Front or something they find online. But those slides and the order of those slides don't necessarily reflect your strongest points. And I guess what we know is that human attention and human memory is so fallible and limited, and you're pitching people who see thousands of pitches a year or over a couple of years. And so your best chance to getting to the next stage is simply to be memorable. You can become memorable by being pithy and concise. So what are your top 3 things? The second kind of thing is, remember your deck is an aid. It's not the thing that you email ahead of time to be read. This is the thing you speak to. So make sure it helps with communication. It's not a script you read out. Big mistake is having too much text on the screen. It's worth investing the time or the money in getting it designed. There are lots of platforms out there now where you can make decks look good. There's a little startup called Canva that does that, for instance. And I'd say specifically for consumer startups, make it really beautiful. I can tell you Eucalyptus's, Tim Doyle's startups deck looked fantastic. If you want us to believe that you have great consumer DNA and that you can sell to consumers and convince them that they want to buy something, it needs to be reflected in kind of all the touch points. Simplicity is key. You have 30, 40, even 50 slides to communicate everything with in an in-person or in a board deck setting. So keep it simple per slide, 1 idea per slide. You can go through them really quickly, but what you don't want is people kind of laboring on your slide for too long, trying to work out what exactly is being communicated here, because that takes the focus away from you and listening to you and what you're trying to say. Wherever possible, use numbers, not adjectives. You don't have really great traction, customers don't really love you, you have an NPS of X, you have growth of X to Y. Those are the sorts of things that build conviction. Adjectives anyone can bandy out. If you're going to use charts or infographics, make sure they simplify. It should take less than a second for me to understand what the graphic is trying to communicate. If I have to think about it too hard, I'm not listening to you, I'm potentially confused, and I'm potentially missing really important points that you're trying to communicate about your business. And what's more, it maybe also becomes a demerit point because it tells me you can't communicate complex ideas clearly. Check your spelling. Fairly obviously, your first slide is important, just like the first page of a novel is important and the opening scene of a movie is important. You want to captivate your viewer and get them interested to learn more. But don't forget your last slide. In contrast to the marketing deck, which kind of gets flicked through really quickly and a binary decision, yes, no, I'll take the meeting, gets made. This slide, your last slide of your board deck, sits up on a screen for 30 minutes, hopefully, if you've timed properly. So it's a way, or it's powerful real estate that you can use to subliminally message whatever these 3 points are, or your number 1 point is that you want these investors to remember. So if you have really great traction, just end up like have a traction, use the traction chart and put it on your last slide. If you have an amazing team, have the team on the last slide. It's amazing how many people sort of let that real estate go to waste. But it's really important. It's too important to just put your email address, which they already have. So your 3 most important slides. Invariably, they sort of end up being kind of a combination of some of the following. Size of the opportunity, the team, and the traction. And I just want to drill into those 3 headlines a little bit more. So size of the opportunity can roughly be captured in an ambition slide or a mission vision statement. And ideally, hopefully, along with that, it actually communicates what you do. So I'm not sort of left 5 or 6 slides in going, so what sort of business is this? Is it a software business, or is it a marketplace, or like what exactly is it that they do? So this is an example of a mission slide. This is, I think, Hampton Creek, which is sort of an eggless egg mayo company. Their big mission is, bringing healthier and more affordable food to everyone, everywhere. I think this may be overused a little bit now, like comparing yourself to Amazon, but Amazon's a software engine for selling virtually everything online. Hampton Creek is a technology engine for utilizing plant proteins to dominate food markets. This is Mixpanel's mission slide, help the world learn from its data. What you'll kind of observe about all of these things, they talk about the world, everyone, everywhere. These are very big missions. So up front, you are stating you are trying to build for a big venture-like outcome, which is really important and good for generating excitement. Next, the team slide. I would say, obviously you can't overstate how important team is in startups, but I would say these are the slides that are done the most poorly in my experience. And I think to improve them, I think it helps thinking about sort of how an investor is approaching the question of team through the pitch process. So these are the kind of key questions we're asking ourselves. Do I want to go on a journey for the next 7 to 10 years with this person? Are they likable? Are they clear communicators? Are they arrogant? Are they a bit prickly? Actual quality of communication really matters. Are these founders magnets for talent? This one is should probably have put first, because it's just the most important thing I look for really these days. Because in the beginning, it's so hard. It's just a founder or a couple of founders, and you need to recruit a great team around you to build a great product in order to build a great company. But you don't really have much to work with in the beginning. You don't have, you'll probably be underpaying compared to market, realistically. You don't have a great employer brand. You don't have your future employers can't sort of brag about the prestige of having worked for this startup that no one's ever heard of. And no one really values employee equity yet either. So what else do you have? Well, you have that vision and that mission that you can sell to people who want to do more with their lives. And in all the great startups that we've invested in, you can see right at the beginning that the founders have that ability to inspire great talent to come and join the journey and forego, great salary, perks, etc. At other companies. And then that foundation of great founders, great early team members becomes a magnet for other high quality talent as the company grows. So that's the other thing I'm also trying to see in work out with team. And then lastly, is this their life's work? That's incredibly important to us. When things get hard, why will you push through? What are your unique insights into building the product and to acquiring customers? So in fact, it's sort of a misnomer to talk about the team slide, which is, the typical headshots one, because actually the whole deck is your team slide. When you talk about product, what are the unique insights that you have due to your connection to the problem that validates or qualifies you to be the team that wins? How do you think about the market? Does it show a level of nuance and understanding that someone whose life's work would have? So actually you want to infuse the quality of the team and the qualification of the team to solve the problem all through the deck and just bring it together on the team slide. So I just thought I'd just kind of quickly stop on this one, which is I think the front series A or maybe B slide, because I think this is a really good example. So there's obviously the two co-founders. They've got their university logos there, which is maybe not hugely meaningful in Silicon Valley, but they are good universities. Then we've got the Y Combinator kind of badge of approval. They've got hints of the can attract and become magnets for talent in the left-hand corner. So they've managed to recruit sales and customer success folks from Box and Dropbox. And on the right-hand side, again, hinting at the recruitment thing is unfair access to a pool of excellent French engineers. And this one's, I think, a really great point for Aussie and Kiwi founders to think about, because it's so hard to recruit engineering talent in Silicon Valley right now, and actually lots of other places in the US. Sorry. If you don't have the pedigree of having, worked with everybody at Google or everybody at Facebook or what have you, and having that pool or that network to encourage to join your startup, how on earth are you going to attract the high quality talent to build the product? This is sort of the mindset of Silicon Valley investors a lot of the time. They're basically saying, well, actually, we're not going to go competing against any of those companies. We've got this proprietary set of talent in France that we're going to draw from. And I think you can do a very similar thing in Australia and New Zealand. We've seen it done really effectively. The R&D tax credit, makes all those dollars into Aussie engineers go further. And they're a hell of a lot cheaper and more loyal than Silicon Valley engineers too. Sorry. So some common mistakes on team slide. Adding up the years of experience, it's just kind of a bit weird and not hugely meaningful. Forgetting logos. Again, just the visual recognition is much faster than hearing and processing the words. Underselling yourself, having weird titles that don't convey what people actually do. Adjectives or numbers again. Having too many people on the team slide. I actually think the Hampton Creek one is a funny example, because they literally have a list of people that's about 50 names long, which is just a bit meaningless. And then having too many advisors on the team slide. Different people will feel differently about this, but I feel unless an advisor has invested or is someone who so rarely gives up their time for other startup or for anyone, and especially startups, it's not very meaningful and can even be a detractor, because it sort of suggests a level of insecurity, or that you need to kind of like borrow, kudos from them in some way. Lastly, traction. Obviously, numbers. And in the beginning, everybody knows that everyone starts from zero, so that's fine that you have small numbers. It's better than nothing. If you have revenue, talk about it. But talk about it on a scale, because it's the velocity of growth that matters more than the raw number. If you're not charging yet, talk about users. And lastly, talk about engagement. I'm actually more interested in kind of number 3, really, more than number 1 and 2 a lot of the time. It's really about, why have you created a product that people love? If I can believe that, then I'll probably believe that the money will follow. The sort of gold standard is, can we see $1 million of revenue within 1 to 2 years? That's roughly what kind of we're looking for, and then exponential growth curve from there. So some examples. So Coinbase, 20% daily signups, pre-revenue, I think, and this was the transaction volume over the first 5 weeks. MRR growth, so monthly recurring revenue growth for a SaaS company. And this is fronts, and they've shown both revenue growth over 12, I think it's 18 months maybe this time frame, and then also the number of companies. And they kind of back that up with the plus, we're really low churn, which is another kind of great slide to have if you have it. Some common mistakes. Competition slides. They're usually just way too busy and confusing to speak to in an in-person meeting, and they often end up getting you in a sort of race to the bottom kind of discussion about why you're better than so and so and so and so and so and so. If people are truly worried about competition, you want it to sort of it'll either be a deal killer upfront, or you want to get to it at due diligence. You don't really want to talk about it in a pitch meeting. I just don't see how they're ever really good conversations. The exception would be if there's a very big incumbent, you obviously have to address that cleverly. The feature comparison slide, these are usually those tables with the ticks and crosses of what you have versus what your competitors have. Again, they're incredibly busy slides. There's no way they can be consumed in a couple of seconds. They also are not really that useful from an investment decision perspective. They really speak to the past, as in what you have built to date, or kind of the present, what you have, and not the future. And venture investors are investing in what you will be 7 or 10 years from now, not what you were or currently are. And then the last thing is that features are just very easy to copy, but product vision is not. And ultimately, that's what we're investing in, your ability to execute on a product vision that we believe will win. So use your product slides to communicate that, not kind of feature by feature comparisons. Testimonial slides are, of course, you're only going to put positive ones up there, so it's wasted real estate. Financial projections, they always sort of end up kind of just being this chart up and to the right and ending in 100 mil of revenue within 5 years, but they never show the underlying assumptions. And so we can't really stress test how believable we feel that is, or even like, what do we need to believe to even think that's in the realm of possibility. So it just ends up being kind of like a wasted slide. And then lastly, and probably just specifically as well for Blackbird, is that we just don't want to talk about exits. If you're thinking about exits, you're not thinking about how to build a great company over the long term and to build a company that you would never sell. The hard thing is building a really great business, not selling a piece of a really great business. And you don't get to be $1 billion, $10 billion, what's Atlassian now, like $43 billion business. If you're thinking about exits from the beginning and unsure if to take an offer at 10 mil, 30 mil, or 100 mil, you have to be, really committed for the long term and not want to sell, essentially. Cool. So that was kind of like a really rushed kind of summary of board pitch decks. I thought the best way to kind of like take this into sort of more meaningful practice is to run through Canva's seed deck. So I might do that now. So I'll stop sharing this slide.
And Sam, thank you so much. We're getting lots of kudos come through in the chat channel, but there are some real nuggets of gold in there. In particular, I never thought about kind of that last slide, but it's so true. It just sits there up on the monitor while you're having a discussion. And I think so rarely do I see that be high impact. That's usually like thank you and an email address. Whereas actually could have a few facts there that will just penetrate, the investor's brain as she or he is sitting there at the table.
And look, we're shameless. Like we fundraise too, right? We fundraise every 2 years. That I do the same thing. Well, this last slide on my deck is our fund performance. It's a waste not to use that real estate.
Great. Well, let's jump into the Canva deck. And the great story about Canva is, like, of course, we now know it as the company that is a household name, incredible growth, an amazing Australian story. But we know that in the first few years, they had literally hundreds of meetings before they got that first check. But let's actually go through this. And maybe it's almost like we can think out loud together. Identify what are some of when we look at a page, what is compelling, and let's see where we agree and disagree, because also one of the things we know is that not all investors think the same, act the same, which is great. And so
this is like, I don't even actually know. I mean, in our drive or whatever, like we have like not a totally different version, but a quite different version, a much earlier version of this. And Mel has said she literally iterated this hundreds of times. So it takes a lot to get this perfect, to be honest. But one comment I'll say up front is what I really love about this is it tells a story. And I think that's the other thing that people underestimate when they deliver something in person. The robotic problem, solution, product, it's fine at communicating information, but it's not great at rhetoric, right? And that's ultimately what you're doing. You're trying to seduce someone to believe in what you believe and come along for that journey. So I guess that's what I really love about this. And we can actually sort of talk about the weaknesses that you barely notice about Canva, about where Canva was at that stage as we walk through. So the opening is publishing eras, back from metal pages to the invention of the typewriter, desktop computers, HTML. New leaders and winners are created at every stage of this sort of technological change. Big mission, big ambition, places it at this is like the why now as well as the big opportunity. So And then, you know, desktop publishing, wow, that looks really hard and slow. And this is kind of the status quo, right? You've got pros using Adobe with, you know, these layers and like, you know, you need a degree to kind of work it out. And then there's just everybody else who needs to create beautiful.
And I think what that slide is inferring is that there actually isn't a tool for everyone else. Would you have recommended that they actually call that out, or like list the ways in which they're trying to solve the problem?
As in the everybody else is trying to solve the problem. I think they kind of do actually further it on, but yeah, absolutely. You just be like, look, there is no incumbent, there is no dominant player for the everybody else's of the world. It's a solely professional market right now. And yeah, I'm sort of like, I'm mixed on this one because I just don't really like competitor slides, but this works really well when you're reading it. I think communicating to it is a little harder. I'm sure Melanie nails it in person, but this is my absolute favorite part of the deck. And it's basically, it just really talks to her deep understanding of the problem. And where there's a deep problem, there's a big opportunity, right? So what does a design process look like in 2013? You have to purchase an Adobe license. You've got to do a degree in design. You've got to purchase stock photography. You have to download fonts. Then you have to purchase layouts. Then you have to slice images and compile it all together and actually design it, get feedback on it via email or DocSend or whatever it is that you're using. And then eventually you have to print it. Like, what a crazy long process to produce like one image. And then I love this bit as well, which is like, she actually sort of like indicates the value of all of these problems. So, you know, a greedy venture capitalist is sort of like, you know, they're sort of salivating, thinking about, you know, the size of all these markets, because, you know, one sort of early bit of kind of resistance was around, I don't know, like graphic designers, that's kind of like a small market, like, you know, are you taking a fraction of the market that isn't happy with Adobe? And so this really kind of, I think, speaks to basically the size of the market and an objection around there. And then really clear sort of like, this is what we're getting rid of. Canva will do everything. And sort of speaks a little bit to how it'll do that. You know, it'll be one-click Pro Tools. The images will be pre-sliced, so you can just drag and drop. You can obviously collaborate with people if it's in the cloud, and you can integrate with platforms and printers. And so I guess rather than like, you know, sometimes those stills of like product mock-ups or whatever, they don't often feel very, I guess, convincing, especially for software. What this has communicated is great product vision without actually showing the product.
And Sam, I was going to ask you a question when we're done, but it's appropriate to ask now. You know, as an early stage investor, we often know that the product that we're seeing is not going to be the product that's going to change the world, right? Like that's going to evolve many times over. And so do you recommend for this first deck that founders resist the urge to kind of show the product and instead have like a very strong articulation of both like the problem, like the job to be done? And
Yeah.
like, what's the right balance there?
Yeah, so it's so like, I hate to be this like, oh, it depends, but very rarely just showing the software in the deck work well for early stage startups. Like they're just like, it's sort of, I don't know if you've like ever done much sort of videoing of like startup stuff, and it's like the hardware startups are always way more interesting to film and like put in like little, because it's just very hard to make pixels look interesting, right? And it doesn't give you a sense of how elegant or the improvement that the user will experience having used the software. So I much prefer to your example, like show me how my life will be different having used the product, and speak or communicate as best as you can what specifically about the product enables that to happen. For hardware startups, and because I invest a bit in food, like I think you need to show a lot more. You know, we've invested sort of in LiDAR and robotics, like the video of the robot kind of navigating the warehouse, or the the 3D models or some
tasting sun-fed chicken like that.
Got, you know, or videos of other people tasting. So I've had to try and coordinate tastings during COVID, which has kind of been interesting. So like, if I can't actually taste it, show me how other people react when they taste it. Neura is a really great, challenging one, because kind of like, you know, but that's not what sells me, right? It's actually like, if I'm going to believe that people want to buy this, I have to understand what's the emotional experience that they have once they experience the product. So they have these great videos, reaction videos, and sort of like YouTubers and stuff like that doing reviews, and that's very compelling as well. We are off track, Rachel.
That's okay. This is all part of the process.
So yeah, and so they sort of talk about the first iteration of Canva, which is really Fusion Books, and was targeting a really narrow niche, which is yearbooks, and having done it before and you know, achieved a really great level of dominance in the Australian, France, and New Zealand markets. Again, you know, you would not expect a yearbook, you know, builder to kind of do it in software like this. Like no school administrator or, you know, school prefect or whatever has time to do that, or the skills to do that. They need something that's really simple and drag and drop. So again, you're just communicating this like product vision without actually having the product. But talking about Fusion Books, sort of, you know, the effect is, oh, I'm de-risking this team. You know, it's because one of the big things that Canva did not have at their seed round was a product. Like they didn't have any revenue, so they didn't have any traction, and they didn't have a product. So how, you know, so the average investor that just kind of like, oh, execution risk, can they actually do it? Well, this is like, they've done it before, right? And I think further along, Melanie talks about how it was profitable, and that's obviously super rare for any software company to get to that point. So a little bit more about speaking to kind of the benefits of doing it as a cloud experience versus.
We love the cloud.
Yeah, we quite like the cloud too.
And just to give people context, this was 2013. And so, I mean, I think now it's a given, but we often talk about like why now at this moment, and something that was really powerful about Canva, which continues to be so, but I think many of us understand, is the power of cloud and how this was going to revolutionize the collaboration and, you know, the way that content is accessed and stored.
Yeah, absolutely. And little plug for Bill Ty's session as part of the Giants conference that we did. I mean, he talked about essentially like for a whole period of time, all he did was just invest in the cloud version of something else, whether it was e-commerce with, oh God, mental blank. Anyway, Wish. Yes, Wish and Canva and then Zoom, you know, it's just like, of course, like, a bunch of these experiences will be delivered better and more cheaply, like in the cloud. Yep. So yes, the why now is an important aspect. And I guess like if this were to be updated, it would probably speak more about mobile, to be honest, and the hundreds of millions of people who don't own a laptop and, you know, will still need to create beautiful designs, but the phone is the primary device that they'll do that on.
And also, I mean, like why now could be that, you know, people have distributed teams, people are working from home, you know, right? Like collaboration is key. And, you know, I think a lot of people who would have used in-house designers are taking a crack and doing it themselves now. Yeah, so absolutely. I think that context is really important.
As well, like a whole bunch of businesses did not used to have to do Facebook advertising or online bookings, or, you know, so there's a whole lot of collateral needs that have been created in the last few months that means that they have to solve that problem with Canva. So again, just like this is like reiterating for the slow investors out there, this is not a pro tool. The market size is not this big, it's this big, it's everybody. And just sort of going deeper into some of the use cases, it's not just kind of like, you know, a niche thing, it's for all sorts of designs. And I really love this because this is around the go-to-market. And this is, I think, an area that a lot of people don't really spend enough time on in their decks, is like how, it's one thing to build a really great product, but how will people learn about it? And so here they've talked about, well, our first apps or our first applications are going to be content or assets that are really viral. So Facebook covers, Facebook flyers, events, Twitter backgrounds, newsletters. Who are these created by? Social media managers, marketing managers, people who are naturally very viral. And this is going to form a growth engine that will bring users into the platform. And ditto, well, anyway, they just kind of go deeper into that. And that has actually proven to be such a dynamite growth engine for the company over many years now. They talk a little bit about the business model, and the team slide here, which is I really love, because this is just ticks all the boxes in terms of connection to the problem, magnets for talent, life's work, etc. So Melanie built Fusion Books to a profitable company at 19, taught design, really intimately understands the problem. Cliff built Fusion Books with her, ran a profitable sales and marketing team. So tick, tick, execution, ability, connection to the problem, done it before. Cameron Adams, designer at Google Wave, and previous founder. So again, has the ability to actually build this. They've managed to attract this talented team. Other talented engineers will want to work with, one of the Google Wave OGs as well. And, stock photo guru, and then a couple of investor slides and advisor investor faces as well. Lars Rasmussen, is meaningful because he was the founder of Google Maps and Google Wave. He doesn't give his time to everybody and anyone. It's a real validation that this is a team that's doing something really interesting and is worth working with, to have him on there. So that's a really great team slide. And then the ask. And what's really awesome about this is a lot of the time, the ask slide is a number and maybe a pie chart showing that you'll spend most of your money on hires, which is kind of what you expect for an early stage technology company. But really what the best sort of funding slides actually break down that money into milestones achieved. So, along the journey to becoming a really big company, a bunch of things get de-risked, from product to go-to-market to team growth, regulatory sometimes, etc. And these 2-year funding cycles are just about reducing risk or proving out this plan that eventually takes 10 years to execute. There's a reason why people don't raise it all up front. They want to see a bit of progress and then more money goes in. So this is a really clear articulation of these are the things that we're going to achieve with this round of funding. And that kind of crispness of articulation is really big for conviction building, I would say. And love that about this deck too. I'm just noticing the time. And then there are a bunch of appendix. So yeah, so this is their last slide of their deck. So this is the, it's the why now, it's the get on this gravy train before it leaves the station slide that will be up for half an hour while we chat about the future of design.
Great. So this is super helpful, and I love that it's very tangible. What slide is missing that you would have loved to have seen, Sam, having flicked through this now? What question would you ask that right now the deck isn't answering?
That's a really good question, because I think what they really cleverly do is totally sidestep the where's your traction, where's your product even, right? If I was super cynical, I'd be like, well, you've got 2 engineers, 2 founders, where's the product? Can I see the product? So, but you just don't even think about it, because you just kind of get to the end of the deck and you're like, yeah, these guys know what they're doing. They have a really clear vision about what they're going to build. And it's really ambitious. It'll probably take a while, but they can see it, they just need the money to go do it.
Yep. Before we open it to general Q&A, I have just, 1 or 2 questions that I'll throw to you. You had mentioned up front that you see 1,000 companies a year. You invest in 2 or 3. What is it that I think the biggest drop off is probably get deck, have meeting. What is if you can distill it down, what is the magic that gets you from deck to coffee or phone call?
So it's taken a while to build this confidence, but like, do I care about the problem? Like, you know, because I only make 2 to 3 relationships a year, if I am not even curious about the problem ultimately and serving that customer base, I just, you know, I save everyone's time and just pass up front. So that's a big one, and it's sort of this like really weird thing where you think that if you're high quality enough as a startup, and I thought this as a founder, it's like, if I'm good enough, investors, all of them will want to invest in me. And it took me a long time before I realized that it's like it's more like dating. It's like it's a many, you know, relationship.
Lids and pots.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And it's nothing personal. And like, there are so many times I've seen something and I've been like, this is a really high quality team. This is a really big problem. This makes total sense. You know, I just don't personally care about it. So I wish you all the best of luck, and I'll be cheering on from the sidelines. There's that. If I don't get it, like if it's really not clearly communicated within the first couple of slides, unfortunately, I just don't have the bandwidth to kind of do 6 emails back, ping pong to make sure I really understand what it was that you were trying to convey. And if I don't understand it, who else doesn't understand it? Again, goes to magnets for talent, etc. Hopefully that kind of helps.
It does. My last question before we head to the audience, you talked about kind of a certain style that you look for when they're pitching. So you want to believe that they really command the space, they understand what they're doing. You had mentioned you want to make sure that you can work with them, they're not arrogant. On the other hand, sometimes Australian founders get kind of docked for not being confident enough. What is the right balance? And again, I think this is a lid and pot question, but for you, what is that right balance of, I know exactly what I'm doing, and I want to demonstrate that confidence, but I don't want to come across as an asshole. What does that look like for you?
It's so hard to generalize because it's sort of like I almost have to draw to examples rather than what's his name? George, the George Getz. Oh, I'm just trying to think. I can give you examples of like real turn off founders. So,
okay.
You know, people who kind of like don't want to answer your questions or are domineering in conversations or dominate over their other co-founders. That's a really weird one that, you know, you occasionally see founders speaking over their co-founders. And on the other hand, it's like you really want it to be conversational. So sometimes the best way to start a pitch is like, you know, really don't spend too much time speaking about the weather, but just, you know, be really honest about how you're and genuine, I would say, about how you discovered the problem and why you were motivated to solve it. You know, we're all humans. Like, empathy is a great way to kind of make a human connection, loosen up the room, and invite kind of like shared, oh yeah, like that is really annoying when that happens. Or yes, I mean, actually, my partner is going through this exact situation right now. That is a really great way to kind of start to build that rapport. And for the founder too, imagine seeing themselves working with this investor on the other side.
Okay.
For you.
Awesome. Listen, we have 10 minutes. Rohit is going to pick out some key questions. A ton came through before the session and plenty through on the chat. So Rohit has his work cut out for him, but okay. Take it away.
Yeah, thank you once again, Sam, for a fantastic session. As we can see from a lot of the feedback, a lot of people really enjoyed that in-depth look at pitch decks. As Rachel mentioned, we received a lot of questions, so I'm going to try and group a few of them. There's just a few points as well, because there were several questions around the availability of this recording. So this recording will be shared on Innovation Bay's YouTube channel, and I believe that a link will be sent out to everyone that registered for this event. And Sam, is this presentation deck available anywhere?
Canva's or mine?
Canva's online. Great. So
that's who's asking, Canva or hers?
Oh, your deck. But also Canvas.
Canvas is, and I will make mine available online. I'll publish it.
Okay, great. So following on from the session, we'll find a way to make sure that we get all of this information out to everyone. So as I mentioned, a lot of questions that were coming in. Quite a few have very similar themes, so I'm going to try and group a few of them together. One of the common questions, Sam, is around, and you touched on this, particularly around Canva. You didn't really ask them the question around particular traction, and you sort of overlooked that. But for companies that have long lead times to revenue, so hardware startups or those companies in health, what are ways that they can sort of help demonstrate traction, or what are the things that you're looking for at those sort of early stages where they might not have specific revenue or customer numbers in place to demonstrate their progress to date?
Yeah, I love this question because I sort of, I look at these sorts of companies a lot. So as I was sort of talking to you at the end, like there are rounds of capital that goes in and risk gets decreased over time, and or assumptions get validated over time, right? And so with each round of funding, that's what we're looking to see. So say, so in some of the cell-based meat startups, for instance, that I've been looking at, what I'm looking is that, okay, sure, it might cost, like, I'm making these numbers up, but like $25,000 today to make a beef burger. At the end of this round, the R&D that's gone into it, the cost will maybe be reduced tenfold, say, and it'll be $2,500. And at that price, we can actually do some taste testings with some channels who might eventually be our customers, and get some pre-orders for which will be ready to deliver on like a funding round after that, for instance. Or, you know, we'll be able to produce a significant, you know, we'll be able to go from producing this tiny amount of volume of product to, you know, this volume of product. So some of our hardware startups, for instance, it's like, it's about producing a couple of beta test units, signing customers up for an early access program at a very nominal sum, like nothing that kind of really relates to the real price that they'll end up paying, but just skin in the game kind of money. And in order to get feedback and validate that the technology works before putting more money in. So it's really about a couple of milestones of progress.
Sure. And again, a follow-up question to that, and just grouping some of the other questions together as well, is specifically around, you know, you touched on you receive 1,000 decks a year, and those get whittled down to a few sort of 1-hour meetings, and even fewer lead to investments. Is there a particular time when it makes the most sense for companies to start reaching out to investors? Is there a particular time where it's too early or too harmful? And I guess added on to that, is there a particular process that you like receiving these decks as well? So is it much better to try and get a warm intro, or is Blackbird or you sort of open to receiving cold decks as well?
I'll answer that last one first, because yes, we're absolutely open to receiving cold decks. You can do so through the website. You can, you know, our emails are all over the internet. It's quite easy to send it to us. You know, our inboxes are pretty horrendous, so it's easy to get missed in an inbox if it's not coming from someone we know. That's the only reason I think why the warm intro works. But a lot of warm intros are not as warm as people think, is what I would caveat as well. Like, you know, a warm intro coming from a founder in our portfolio, or a co-investor, or an LP in our funds, you know, or angels that we've co-invested with frequently before, they're really awesome. But if it's just some person who's met me a couple of times, or is like a 2-degree connection with me on LinkedIn or whatever, it's like you're just as well, like just sending me a cold email and just articulating really well why I would be interested to meet, or anyone would be interested to meet. And I feel like that would work even better, to be honest. What was the first question again? Too early to meet. Like a lot of investors will say it's never too early, and they like to get to know people over a period of time, but that can swing both ways, right? It's because if you kind of speak to someone well in advance and progress is really slow, we know that the process has been really slow over that time frame, and we care about velocity of progress. So honestly, wearing my founder hat, like, you've got to use that strategy to your advantage. And remember that, you know, our time, by the time you actually kind of take out partner meetings, you know, and, you know, running a fund, being managers to other people, and we really don't have that much time to meet with founders. So we have to be pretty deliberate about the time we do spend with founders. So endless coffee meetings for no particular purpose are personally not my way of doing things. In terms of, but if you're fundraising specifically, like you're opening a round, you are best placed to execute that like you would an auction. Just back all those meetings up one after the other and create a competitive environment where hopefully you have lots of investors interested at the same time, and then ultimately offering you competing term sheets at a given time.
Great. Next question. There's plenty of people submitting questions around the ask slide, specifically around, should they include or exclude valuation number or percentages? Is that something that you personally like or dislike?
Not really. I mean, I don't find it really offers any value. Like ultimately, the prospective investor is going to decide what they think that the valuation should be. And at the early stages, like there's not a huge amount of variance. It's sort of somewhere between 20%, like 15 and 25% dilution at that early stage. So it doesn't have to often. When it's up there, it actually tells something that is sort of a bad thing, which is that you've been over diluted too early. For instance, maybe you sort of had some predatory early investors or something like that, and you've been over diluted. And so I'm thinking, oh, there's like a recap. I have to care that much to do the recap. When it'd be much better if I fall in love and then sort out the mess later.
Yeah. Conscious of time, and I know that Rachael generally sort of likes signing off as well with the final question, but. Last submission submitted from Claire Mueller, which speaking to what you mentioned in terms of de-risking opportunities and how the risk profile potentially changes over time. She wants to know, how much does life experience count versus experience with other startups or companies? So I guess domain expertise, but never started a company versus someone who's had multiple companies, but not necessarily in that specific.
I mean, every investor and every fund is probably going to have a different house view on this. Like we literally, have a saying internally, like we back the hungry, not the proven. We live in an amazing era where 19-year-olds can start graphic design platforms, university dropouts, run some of the most profitable, biggest technology businesses in the world. Like having run a business before is not what qualifies you to build a startup.
Great. Once again, Rachael, do you have a final question for Sam?
Oh, well, we usually ask a question, but it's aging out because, times are changing and it feels like we're kind of getting back to business. But I guess, given that the world has had just a significant change in the last few months, what advice do you have for founders who are just starting their journey now? How can they either get through this time or seize this as an opportunity to build something great?
I think for every founder, it's like, what's so great about founders and entrepreneurs is that, everybody else looks at a situation and wrings their hair in hands and just goes, oh, it's such a bad situation. And founders and entrepreneurs go, how can I turn this to my advantage? How do I make lemonade out of this? We've had companies that, where their sole early market that they were targeting was like running, was conferences, really big scale, like 10,000 plus conferences. Well, that industry has gone to zero for at least 12 months. They've quickly pivoted to public sanitation, like sanitation of public areas. Other companies like working on sort of office space utilization software, not so important when, you've got COVID outbreaks in your town. You've got much, your customer is engaged with much bigger problems. You can't sell to that problem now, but what you can sell to and what they've quickly pivoted to is social distancing. How do you know you're observing 2 meter distances between people? Like, be really nimble. I love the expression Sarah Tubble uses, do not sit in the fetal position or lie in the fetal position. Like, mobilize, think about where, this is an opportunity, and it is honestly a once in a lifetime opportunity for so many companies.
They always say a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. Well, Sam, thank you so much for joining us. You were awesome as always, and hopefully everyone got a ton out of your session. I know I did personally. We'll make all those materials available, and we'll see everyone back in the following week. Thanks, awesome. Sam. Take care.
Take care.